Ever wonder what the shoulder patches worn on an Army uniform mean? The patch worn on the left shoulder is the unit the soldier is currently assigned to, and a patch on the right shoulder is that of the unit he or she served in combat with. This patch is important to soldiers and veterans because each of those colorful patches has a story behind it. When you become part of a military unit, you become part of that story, part of the history behind the patch. Hi, I'm Jim Bromley, and this is the Roving Historian channel. This is a summary history of the U.S. Military Assistance Command Vietnam, MACV for short, during the Vietnam War. The United States Military Assistance Command Vietnam, known by the acronym MACV, was a joint service command under the Department of Defense. MACV was created in February 1962 in order to increase assistance to South Vietnam, as well as command and control all of the advisory and assistance efforts in Vietnam. The command was dissolved on March 29, 1973, after the withdrawal of U.S. combat troops. MACV was the highest level of command in country. Therefore, the history of MACV is really the military history of the Vietnam War. During the French involvement in Vietnam after World War II, referred to as the Indochina War, the United States provided some limited military assistance to the French. This was mostly in the form of military equipment, some naval and air support, and CIA covert operations. In September of 1950, U.S. President Harry Truman sent the Military Assistance Advisory Group, or MAG, to Vietnam to assist our French and Vietnamese allies. With the departure of the French, the communist insurgency in South Vietnam continued to grow, and with it, U.S. military aid. For example, in 1961, military aid jumped from $50 million per year to $144 million per year. U.S. advisors were pushed down to the battalion level, and their numbers increased from 746 in 1961 to over 3,400 when MAG was placed under the command of MACV when it was created in 1962. The commanding general of MAG and then MACV was General Paul Harkins. In May of 1964, combat deployments became too complicated for an advisor group to control. The role of MACV was expanded and absorbed MAG mission and its personnel. The following month, General William Westmoreland took command of Military Assistance Command Vietnam. During his tenure, MACV would grow to command and control the following major components listed here. The bottom line is that Commanding General of MACV was responsible for 4 corps-sized maneuver commands, all naval and air assets within the territorial borders of Vietnam, all special operations assets, as well as all military advisors to South Vietnamese forces, which, at the height of American involvement in the war in Vietnam, were 9,430 American personnel acting as advisors on the district and battalion levels alone, training, advising, and mentoring Vietnamese in the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN, Republic of Vietnam Marine Corps, Republic of Vietnam Navy, and the Vietnamese Air Force. The major Special Operations Command within MACV was the Studies and Observation Group, or SOG. Contrary to popular belief, the acronym SOG does not officially stand for Special Operations Group, although Studies and Observation was an attempt to hide what the command did, which was unconventional warfare and highly classified operations throughout Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. MACV SOG was comprised of U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, Navy SEAL teams, Air Force combat controllers, Marine recons, Air Force Special Operations pilots of the 90th Special Operations Wing, and other Special Operations personnel. Naval Forces Vietnam was made up of those naval forces which were in direct operational support to ground forces within the borders of South Vietnam. This excluded the aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, and naval gunfire support. However, it did include the Navy's units in the 2, 3, and 4th Corps tactical zones. Over the course of the war, the Coastal Surveillance Force, Task Force 115, River Patrol Force, Task Force 116, and the Riverine Assault Force, Task Force 117, came under the control of Naval Forces Vietnam. Task Force 116 and 117 were used in the Joint Army-Navy Mobile Riverine Force. MACV, through the commander of Naval Forces Vietnam, also commanded the naval support activities in Saigon and Da Nang. Also under Naval Forces Vietnam was the Naval Advisory Group, the 3rd Naval Construction Brigade, the Seabees, the Military Sea Transportation Service Office, which coordinated sea lift of supplies to Southeast Asia, and the officer in charge of construction, which is civilian construction projects, the Naval Research and Development Unit, testing new equipment in the field, and the Commander, Coast Guard Activities Vietnam. The news of the enemy's Tet Offensive, which began on January 31, 1968, proved to be contrary to what General Westmoreland had touted as positive indicators in the progress of the war. Although Tet was a huge defeat for Communist forces, the American support for the war spiraled. In June 1968, General Westmoreland was replaced by General Creighton Abrams. While Westmoreland is best known for his strategy of search and destroy, Abrams implemented the winning of hearts and minds and the Vietnamization of the war. Abrams was largely successful, demonstrated through the ability of the South Vietnamese Army to repel the NVA's Easter Offensive of 1972. However, public and political support for the war in Vietnam could never be regained after Tet. Abrams was replaced by General Frederick Wayland in June of 1972, and like Westmoreland before him, went on to serve as Chief of Staff of the Army. General Wayland oversaw the drawdown of U.S. armed forces in Vietnam during the last half of 1972. The Paris Peace Accords that ended the United States combat involvement in Vietnam were signed on January 27, 1973. The agreement provided for a 60-day ceasefire, during which time all remaining American and other United Nations combat forces were required to be withdrawn from Vietnam. With no forces to command, MACV was no longer needed. The command was disbanded on March 29, 1973. Any American military personnel remaining in Vietnam at that time came under the control of the Defense Attaché Office, or DAO, in Saigon. The huge complex that was built to house MACV headquarters and the ARVN Joint General Staff at Tan Son Nhut Air Base was dubbed the Pentagon East during the war. After the disbanding of MACV, Pentagon East housed the DAO. This compound was used as one of the 2 evacuation points for Operation Frequent Wind, the removal of American civilian and Vietnamese evacuees from Vietnam during the fall of Saigon in April of 1975. The other was the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. It is also the site of the last American ground casualties in Vietnam. At 3:30 a.m. on April 29, 1975, a North Vietnamese rocket hit Guard Post Number 1 at the gate of the DAO compound, killing 21-year-old Marine Corporal Charles McMahon and 19-year-old Lance Corporal Darwin Lee Judge. If you'd like to read about MACV and the Vietnam War, I'd recommend the recently released book, The Vietnam War, A Military History by Jeffrey Warrow. Like most of the tomes about the war, the author covers the politics involved in both the U.S. and Saigon, but I appreciated his treatment of military operations. Another survey book about Vietnam that I personally enjoy was The Vietnam War by Jeffrey Ward and Ken Burns. It's the companion book to the documentary series, and most of the vignettes in the documentary are expanded upon in the book. I liked reading it almost as much as watching the documentary. The book is always better than the movie, right? Amazon affiliate links to both books and Ken Burns' documentary are in the description below. If you enjoyed this History Behind the Patch video, I hope you'll hit the like button or leave a comment. Swing by the channel to find more, and please subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos and help us build our channel. Finally, always rate, review, and share what you enjoy reading. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.